Hello students, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you again in Qualitative Research Methodology course. This week we will talk a bit deeper than the previous one. We will try to understand what qualitative study is and try to explore ideas in qualitative study. Okay, qualitative research attempts to broaden or deepen. Here, broaden, you have to understand this as broaden your understanding, not about generalize your understanding. And or deepen means you go deeper. Commonly, you try to understand how things came to be the way they are in our social world. It means so many things happen around us, and then we try to seek the best way to understand the event or the phenomenon or phenomena surrounding us in our social context. So if the research questions involves exploring how people experience something or their perspectives or their views about something, exploring a new area where issues are not yet understood or properly identified. For example, you try to develop a set of questionnaire, try to dig up or explore about the perspective. And if you try to assess whether a new service is implementable, in this case, you are trying to see not only the quantity of success, but try to see how it is applied or applicable in terms of practical aspects of the service. And if you try to look at real life context of something or a sensitive topic where you need flexibility to avoid causing distress, it means you try to not to push too far the individuals that needs that you want to study about. So you can avoid causing distress by, and so if you are trying to do those kind of effort to understand things like I have told earlier, it is better for you or your team. Probably you need to think and consider to develop a qualitative research by applying qualitative methodology. So it is simply understand that designing a qualitative research, you try to grab something into the deep view of the things based on subjects or people who are involved with the phenomenon or phenomena that you are trying to study. Like I have told you in the previous session, that qualitative study allows us to go deeper. It means that while you do quantitative research for generalizing things by testing hypothesis, for example, in experimental study, you're trying to say that this approach or intervention can be successful in larger population or in other places. But in qualitative, we don't see the wide screen as a researcher. We try to see from a very focused angle that can help you to understand very deeply about the things that you're trying to study. That's why when you come with qualitative study, you come with so many and complex data that need your your skill to process and analyze the data, because the data are very complex, and it's hard to limit or restrict the large of the data in qualitative study. So it requires very I can say it's quite strong effort from you to understand the data, because you need to do so many stages and process to to process the data. Then you can take very strong conclusion based on the data. So if we try to make a brief overview of the nature of qualitative research, we can define qualitative research as is concerned with developing explanation of social phenomena. It means that we have chance to or opportunity to understand very deep about social phenomena that we are trying to understand by conducting a research. So that is to say that it aims to help us to understand the social world in which we live, and why things are the way they are. It is concerned with the social aspects of our world and seeks to answer questions about, for example, the first one, why people behave the way they do. Like, oh my God, how to explain a situation or things demonstrated by particular person or some people in particular population, and you try to observe and try to interview or try to read data about them, and then you try to understand their behavior. For example, people with multilingual background, and then how can they switch to one or two or more languages in single communication event? How can they do that? So we can trace to the fact from the field by studying the people, how they develop their language skills, how they develop like patterns in communication, what language is suitable for particular purposes. For example, like in our context in Lombok, for example, when they go to the office or schools, people tend to speak in Indonesian language or the national language than their native language. But in other places in West Nusa Tenggara, like in Bima or Dompu, they tend to speak in their native language wherever they are, yeah? Even in the office or at school or whatever. Yeah, they have they put their language as their main communication device than the national language. So what encouraged the two communities or two classification of communities, like based on their tendency on their native language, what make them so different in deciding what language to speak in what context or what purposes, and how opinions, the second question, how opinions and attitudes are formed. So that is very this question is highly related to my explanation about why they why they did like that, and then what encouraged them, what motivate them, and what tradition or what habit that stimulates this phenomena, and then how people are affected by the events that go on around them. Like for example, considering the large frequency, the high frequency of using native language in particular communities, and then what happened to their learning interaction at school. Can they can they use their native language to serve the goals of their education, for example, like like school, like students target competence or the purpose of a particular subject at school. So how can they support that goals by using native language instead of the national language, considering that like in the local peoples in Lombok, the local language in Lombok, we call it Sasak language. They have very very big gap of how many lemma they have in Sasak and how many lemmas they have in Indonesian. Based on dictionary, the formal dictionary issued by the Language Bureau in West Nusa Tenggara, the difference is a quarter to one. Like if you have like 250 lemmas in Sasak, and then you will find Indonesian language will have 1,000 lemmas. It means the distance between the two languages are quite large, quite large. And then how to fill the gap between the two languages while all the textbooks, curriculum, and all supporting techniques, documents, and material are produced in the national language, while they are trying to teach those things in the native language of Sasak. So it becomes it will be very interesting to study the things like that, and then how people are affected by the events that go on around them. It means that, so what happened next? What will happen to students who are taught by using their native languages, while the fact that the you know the the components of the two languages are quite varied in terms of the lemmas, in terms of linguistic support or system in the two languages. So that will be very interesting to observe, to study, and what will happen with the achievement or students' achievement after the class, and how and why cultures and practices have developed in the way they have. It means that we try to study a certain habit, for example, often demonstrated by some people in particular population or community, and we try to understand why this kind of things or this habit occurs among the people there. Let us try to see, for example, why people in, let's say, in Sasak community, whenever they meet strangers or anyone passing their house, and they say hello, but they don't have any precisely equivalent word with hello in Sasak. They prefer to do something else to say hello. For example, people of Sasak, they will try to offer breakfast, coffee, morning coffee, or something to the passengers, to people who traveling, passing their house. This is very local habit that is very interesting, because maybe you will not find this habit or this kind of social interaction in Western countries or other parts of the world. But when you try to understand hello as part of your code of politeness and open community, openness of community, but in this part of the world they don't have that word, but they prefer to say something different, which may be very different from the view of Western people. Yeah, so this kind of things can be questions like, why do they behave like that? Why they develop that kind of habit or pattern of interaction or symbol of friendship whatsoever? But the point is, the different will raise questions that will be very interesting to study further. Okay, we go to types of qualitative research approach. This is summarized by from two books, Creswell and Hancock et al. So, the first one, we try to understand narrative research. This kind of research allows a researcher to conduct a research based on stories. For example, we are interested in studying, for example, people who work with particular art. For example, we go for the puppeteers, for example, or other people who serve very specific function in community. For instance, we don't have any clue about how traditional spiritual leaders in particular community acquired or possess their ability in leading praying or in leading local tradition, or how they grab the knowledge about how to study traditional astronomy, for example, that helps them to survive over centuries. And then we try to ask someone who are very quite less educated, for example, but they have the skills, they have knowledge, they have capacity to be the best resource person for our research. And then we start asking him or her to tell us stories about his journeys year by year, yeah, until current day. So, and then we try to record all the information from him, and then we try to understand his stories, his explanation. Finally, we try to make like a conclusion or points based on his stories. This kind of research allows us to take data from very specific person in community. Why people will use narrative research? Because some expert mention that human or people have very strong capacity in making stories. It even the story not only goes in parallel generation. For example, you tell a story only for the person who are living in the same era with you, but stories can go very far to the future. You can even get the story from the past. So that is the strong skill in our civilization, which is oral transformation of oral transfer of knowledge and information. You can tell a story and it lasts forever. Like it can go to the next generation, and it remains there until today. For example, like the story about maybe like the story of Princess Mandalika in Lombok. So there's no way to understand the story first, not by conducting a narrative research, because we want to hear the story from different perspective, from many people who believe or who live with the stories, and they will try to share to us, and then we try to grab information from our research person. This kind of research mostly deals with study of anthropology, for example. You can trace back phenomenon of how people think or do towards something. Yeah. based on their stories, and you can trace back to their elders about the stories, and you might find that the story is inherited from generation to other generation. Okay, so the power of storytelling is believed as one of uh, one of strength of human civilization. Okay, we go to the second type of qualitative phenomenological research. This kind of research allows a researcher to understand the meaning of people's lived experience. It means that a particular person experience sometimes is quite important to be understood, and then because of his maybe his quality or his uh, you know excellent behavior or skills or other capacity that make him very extraordinary or unique. Yeah. For example, if we try to understand why a person, a soccer player, for example, like let's say Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, why, how could he have so good talent in playing soccer, and what and he is one of very uh, rare rich player who who is not really living in very glamour and spending so much money for fun. Yeah. So we try to understand why this person who has very not only much but is a billionaire. He got so many uh, payment based on his skills, but he doesn't seem to be expending the money for his for only for having fun. Yeah. And then we try to understand that from the person, and then we try to explore what behind the story, what behind the behavior, what kind of family raised him, what kind of neighborhood, what kind of schools, what kind of friends, teachers, and everything. We try to explore very deep about the person, and then we try to identify his experience and focuses on his experience of a phenomena that we try to understand. So the foundation of this type of study is philosophy. If you want to read more about this, it is highly suggested to read more about philosophy, like from Husserl, Heidegger, Sartre, and Merleau-Ponty. They will give you strong foundation before you go further with phenomenology. This type of study is not really simple to understand. Like I just explained you have to have good reading experience or literature about philosophy. So it will help you to understand phenomenology. And then we go to what we call as grounded theory, the third type of qualitative study. This we can use this when you find very limited or even none of theories offer you an explanation for a phenomenon that you're trying to study. For example, you try to find particular or unique behavior or attitude from some people, like in maybe in one place in Turkey, if I'm not mistaken, they can communicate using uh, something that we call as language, but it's not really a language that commonly we know. Yeah. They s- they they can communicate from very long distance. Like if you are in the village, and your family or your brother is uh, talking to you from the hill, for example, with quite distance, like half kilometers in one valley, for example. You try to ask him, "Have you had your lunch just now?" But not by yelling the common language we know, not by their language, local language. They use a very interesting voice that works like a language, because when they pronounce that, it's like singing, like a bird singing. Yeah? When they produce particular composition, it means, "Have you had your lunch?" And then the person somewhere half kilometer from the speaker will understand the message and will reply as when while reply by very relevant answer, or let's say very perfect maxim between the two communicators. So this is very interesting, and we cannot find any literature or reference or theories talking about this, for example. And then you begin to ask, can I conduct a study about this? Of course you can. That is how that is why we consider to use grounded theory. Yeah. We try to grab the closest theories or stages that can help us to recognize, because we cannot analyze, we don't have support, full support of the theories, because by the end of your study you will try to develop a theory, yeah, about particular phenomenon. So grounded theory can be used for very rare case, and not many, even non scholars have studied about the phenomenon. So that will be very interesting for you to explore grounded theory.